Been said it could be a little bit of a bubble and it could be a little bit of an echo chamber sometimes. So I don't know, quick show of hands, who's been to another event so far at Social Media Week? Ah, okay, so that's probably about half of you. So we want to avoid that kind of trap of being an echo chamber. So in sort of true Stephen Fry QI style, I've got a few buzzwords, some sort of penalty phrases that if our panel are unlucky enough to actually use at any stage, there's no gun call or something like that. We're just trying to uncover some original thinking here today in the future of comms debate. So the first penalty one we have is leverage. Careful with that one. Easily done. The next one is viral, unless you're talking about medicine. Dangerous. Then we have, it's a conversation. I think we know that, or do we? We just need to move on from
that was the main
You're allowed to talk about that one then. And what's this one? We've lost control. Or we never had control. And we've also got, it's all about people. If you can only manage to say that, I think we need to go a bit further than that one. But we've got a fantastic panel covering each of the 4 sectors in this kind of space. So if you'd like to start us off then, Katie.
Hi everyone, I'm Katie McLean. I work at Spectrum Brands and I manage digital for Remington and Russell Hobbs across Europe.
My name's Paul Sutton. I'm the head of social comms at Bottle. We're an Oxford-based PR agency. And I look after social media strategy and digital strategy across our client base.
Hi, my name's Eva Keogan. I'm a blogger at Next Minx. I've also been a corporate blogger and I'm also head of innovation at Fishburn Hedges, so it all depends what time of day it is. But today I'm a blogger.
My name's John Bernstein. I'm the deputy editor of the New Statesman and I run newstatesman.com.
Something that is becoming more to the fore is really relevancy. And from a PR point of view especially, whether we're dealing with journalists or bloggers or even brands on the other side, sometimes it's about relevancy of not just topic and what we're talking about, but relevancy of I'm going to use one of those words, the conversation that goes on between all those partners. I was saying to the guys just before we sat down that I personally feel that there's a big kind of red herring out there, which is this phrase, it's the conversation, which has been around for quite a while. My own feeling is that maybe from a PR perspective, too much emphasis is placed on this thing of the conversation. And you see brands diving in and PRs diving into blogger relations or whatever it might be and having great conversations going on but very little coming out of it at the end. And it comes back to this thing of relevancy really, and conversations are fantastic and building relationships is great, participation is fantastic, but there has to be an end result to that. And I think that's the way that social media perhaps and comms in general have become a bit, here's another one, out of control. So it's something that I think is becoming even more important. I'm interested to hear what others think of that, really.
We're about to. So Eva, you're itching to come back on that one, I think.
Well, I think we've moved away from the TV, which I think is a massive change, and Twitter has just been extraordinary. I think we should all be experimenting. And when you talk about conversation, when I was in-house and blogging at lastminute.com, I was going off to do a spa review. So I was getting a train, and I was going from Euston on Virgin Trains. So I tweeted that, and I ended up having a conversation with Virgin Trains, who were kind of like one of the first kind of train companies on Twitter. And then I said where I was going, so the hotel tweeter jumped in, and the conversation went over a 3-week period. So if you looked at that, it's the kind of thing that you can't buy campaign-wise, is that everybody was engaging and people were waiting for my post to be published. So it created this multi-level environment to exist in, and also it was my real-time updates, but nobody was bothered. There was no, I mean, obviously it was quite a soft story, but from the traditional days of having a spa or beauty reviewer go to a spa to actually this kind of living, breathing experience was great. I mean, that's what sort of turned me onto the whole thing, really.
And what were the benefits of that? Did that benefit you personally, or?
Everyone involved, because it's sort of all my, the guy that I was tweeting with was, it was about 3 or 4 years ago, so of course it was all pretty new then. But, I think these are all tools that you need to kick around and sort of see if they work. Are they robust enough for you? And if they don't work, there's going to be something else. But we are at the beginning of something that is so huge, and we know, last year it was all about revolution, and I think people are very afraid of what's happening. But underneath, you've got, as individuals, as brands, as agencies, we need to sort of, look and learn, really.
So can I just bring John in then? The conversation, is this something that gets talked about a lot at the New Statesman at the moment?
No, it doesn't. I was just thinking about your cards, and if we'd done this 10 years ago or 15 years ago, then the phrase "content is king" would have been among those.
Those are the days.
And I kind of think content is king, because I'm allowed to say it, 'cause it's not on one of your cards. And that's kind of where I come at social media from. It's the application of the application rather than the technology itself. And in a sense, that's quite obvious, but that's the real attraction. I'll come on to this red herring thing in a minute. That's the real attraction to me about Twitter, surprise, surprise, because it's in its simplicity that people then apply their creativity, and then you do very interesting things. And if I can just very quickly talk about how I started to use it, because before I was at the New Statesman, I worked for ITN, I worked for Channel 4 News, and kind of run their multimedia side of things. And one of the things that I started to do in about April 2008 was to tweet from the news meetings, because twice a day ahead of the 7 o'clock programme, there was a news meeting at 9:30, there was a news meeting at 2:15. And to me, personally, just being part of the team, it was the most interesting collective hour or so of my day, because there are lots of articulate, intelligent people basically having a row about why their story should be at the top of the programme, why they should run longer, and why they should be the star of the show. And there were debates about editorial dilemmas, there were debates about legal dilemmas, there were debates about how to get the light and shade of the programme right, the off-diary versus the diary, the foreign versus the domestic, the fun versus the very serious. And all this stuff was really interesting. So I started to tweet it. So I started, in a sense, to have this conversation with Channel 4 News viewers. Eventually, it took a little while to get going, but I suddenly realised what I was interested in, they were interested in. And sometimes it was literally just the colour of Jon Snow's socks, but they were interested in that as well, because there were a million people watching the programme every night. So it was in a sense, it was the conversation.
It's kind of giving people an insight into the content creation process.
Exactly. Now, how you apply that to all of your businesses, well, it requires a bit of a creative leap. But I think you probably can take that idea and say, yes, you can superimpose it in various different places.
And how about your red herring?
My red herring is also a get out of jail free card, which is my red herring is this tendency in this kind of arena, not this arena, but in the technology arena. I started writing about technology in 1992, so I've experienced it a bit pre-internet age, is to make predictions about technologies, because you always get it wrong. And if you want proof that you always get it wrong, think about SMS text messaging, which for a period during the lifetime of mobile phones became the cash cow of mobile phone companies. Who would have predicted that? Nobody would have predicted that. Someone then took that idea and said, actually 160 characters is too long, let's make it 140 characters. Who would have predicted that would be one of the most successful, I'm talking about Twitter obviously, one of the most successful social medias. So never predict, that's my red herring.
Thanks very much, John. And Katie, working for Spectrum Brands with Russell Hobbs and Remington under your remit, what are your main things that you're pushing internally?
I think that's the first point to make, really, from a brand perspective, is that for us it's all about convincing the key internal stakeholders that it is worthwhile doing that it is worthwhile investing in digital. And I think that's something that a lot of brands, that's the very first stumbling block. So that's the first thing, is to actually convince people internally that it's a worthwhile thing to do, then the second thing is to get your strategies right. So what you were saying, making sure that you've got clear objectives and goals before going out into the ether and experimenting with everything. I don't think that there's necessarily a platform that is right or wrong. I think it all comes back to traditional marketing in the sense that you need to understand your audience, you need to know who you're going out and who you're speaking to, and then decide what platform's appropriate for them. Obviously, managing digital across Europe is very, very interesting because Twitter doesn't really resonate that much with our Italian marketing teams. Facebook isn't the core social media platform for Russia or for Spain, for example. So I think just making sure when you start out with your strategy and hone your strategy, whether it be with PR comms, whether it be with digital in general, is just to make sure that it's all about the consumer, it's all about what your goals and objectives are and setting those from the outset.
Okay, so I mean, just to say, when we talk about the future, we're not falling into that trap of saying we want to predict what the technology is going to be like in a year or two. But what we're interested in getting to the heart of in this debate, and I'm taking questions from the audience as well, so just please put your hands up when you have one, is what actually do you take back to your organisations? How do you change your skill set? What should you be learning about? What should you, if you're a manager, what should you be telling your teams to do? So that's the kind of area we're looking at when we talk about the future. Does any of the panel want to come back on any of those points or elaborate?
I think you're dead right, and John brought up a good point about the technology side of things, that the technology is just the tools, and you have to bear this in mind. It's so easy to get swept away with Google Plus is the next big thing, Pinterest is taking off, and it just so misses the point, it really does. Social media has brought about humanization again of communications as much as anything. You think about, going back 20 years, the way PRs dealt with journalists was on the phone. It was going out and meeting them and face-to-face conversations. Then we got into email and things, and everything all went technical, for want of a better word. And that interaction kind of got lost. And what social media has done is bring that back again. So there's a humanization element in the communications industry now that is the real forefront of everything. Okay. And it's using the tech in intelligent ways to make the most of that humanisation element, which is the important thing to my mind anyway.
I think there's also, I mean, my complex life, I'm, on one hand, I've been out in the field with Save the Children as a journalist for them, blogging my way around Bangladesh, and we all play so many different roles now, so I can be sort of outside of office hours, I can run my blog, I have advertising on it, I belong to a network.
One thing that hasn't been mentioned at all is SEO as well. How much is that a big part of PR communication? It's people's lives and journalists as well now.
This is the bit you have to cut out. We're dreadful at SEO at our place, which is part of the reason I'm so attracted to social media, because one of the applications of social media is the ability to see great stuff that you're producing. Okay. And there is a definite, having been involved in sort of in websites as a journalist since sort of the mid-90s, there was definitely this sort of, if you build it, they will come mentality. And clearly, SEO is one way of getting around that red herring. But if you use social media right, you don't bombard people. Again, it's how you apply what I do to what you do. But if you pick and choose what you disseminate or attempt to disseminate through social media, it can have an amazing effect. We go to press with the new Statesman, so it comes out London newsstands on a Thursday, comes out the rest of the country on a Friday. We go to press. A couple of hours ago, I went to press. Well, actually, slightly less because, slightly less than that today. Anyway, and we also put out a press release. So if we've got some really decent lines. So last week we had interviews with Boris Johnson and Ken Livingstone. There were some really cracking lines in those interviews, which we knew would make a bit of noise. Now, the traditional method is we send out a press release to the traditional print media and to the broadcast media. But we also simultaneously blog the best bits of that. And so you get this kind of, the phones start ringing because everyone wants to get hold of the full copy, but also suddenly you get a bit of a storm. And that's quite exciting, but it's also in terms of the ability to create a buzz and to know, actually, we've got something good and we know that this is going to work. That's something you literally just couldn't do before.